Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have District 1 Republican, the great state of Florida, back on. It's the firebrand himself, Matt Gaetz. Matt, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Pax.
You're better than good. I'm watching some video before we started today, and you're questioning Christopher Wray. He's got the same look in his face a lot of times as people like John Kirby and Blinken. These people, they have perfected this. It's almost like the Merrick Garland look as well. They don't know anything about anything. One is heading the DOJ, one's heading the FBI, one is the Secretary of State. How is this administration even surviving with people who can't answer a simple question like what you had for breakfast?
Yeah, if you're wondering why our nation is in decline, look no further than some of these people working for Joe Biden, unable to do their job. We saw that in the head of the Secret Service, who had to resign after the withering questions that my colleagues on the Oversight Committee, put into the discourse. Right. And Christopher Wray today couldn't answer basic questions about the shooter, about their contacts, and he couldn't answer basic questions about just the operation of the executive branch. Zooming out from this assassination, I think it's really troubling to a lot of Americans that Joe Biden has been in this diminished state, and it seems like there was a conspiracy to cover it up. And I think Kamala Harris was involved in that conspiracy. I think certainly the heads of the intelligence entities, CIA, FBI, they brief the president regularly. You're telling me they've been given regular briefings to the president and they haven't noticed what we all got to observe during that unscripted debate? So Wray really could not pinpoint the moment of Joe Biden's decline. And I think that it showcased really a lack of transparency across the board that has become a pretty dominant feature of our questioning of these high-end administration officials.
Check out the Matt Gaetz Media Network. He's all over the place. He's an incredible host of the show. He's an incredible, also, firebrand representative out of Florida. As we're watching all of this unfold, the big lie, you just alluded to it. For 3.5 years, we were supposed to believe that Joe Biden was fine. All of a sudden, something happened on June 27th on that stage that night. And the media no longer could be complicit. When I knew he was out, Matt, and tell me what you think about this, is when Dana Bash and Jake Tapper were fair in that debate. When I saw that, I figured, oh, he's done if they're not going to cover for him tonight.
We knew from the first question that we were seeing a Joe Biden that was really being introduced for the first time to America, someone who did not have control over the facts or the faculties that someone needs to be president of the United States. And by contrast, President Trump cast a bold vision to actually reduce inflation, secure the border, and restore America's standing around the world. Kamala Harris owns every one of those failures of the Biden administration. And one of the reasons I wanted to delve into the national security meetings that happened in and around in the White House is I want to know to what extent Harris has really taken active measures to cover this up, to prop Biden up. And if that's true, I think it informs on how the American people ought to see her trustworthiness or lack thereof.
We're interviewing Matt Gaetz before Joe Biden speaks tonight. So let me ask you about that. Joe Biden is not cognitively able to answer questions with Robert Hur. He can't be prosecuted. He can't do a debate without screwing up the entire time. His wife had to walk him off as if he was in a walker. We don't know where the guy was for 3 or 4 days. Yeah, I'm supposed to believe that he can be the president for 6 more months. Matt, you can't make the 25th Amendment happen, but the cabinet members can. The vice president can. Should we feel safe at all having this guy in charge for 6 more months? What's he going to say tonight?
Yeah, I certainly don't feel safe, but I worry that was part of the transaction. I think that Joe Biden became very worried about his legacy and the fact that he's now going to be known in history as the guy who lost a presidential debate so badly that it drubbed him out of the race, and he didn't want it to drive him out of the presidency. And so I think the reason it took a while for Pelosi and Obama and Hakeem Jeffries to nudge Biden out to pasture was because they had to figure out what the legal portions of that transaction were, probably what the financial portions of that transaction were, campaign finance and otherwise. And when they finally got that deal cooked, then he gets to maintain some power. There'll probably be, I don't know, pardons for Hunter Biden or other family members of his. And then he will try to, pass the torch here to Harris. And, look, I think it's going to be a very different race with her in the contest. Now, that's not to say it's worse for Republicans, because I think she is going to be a uniquely unpersuasive candidate in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, those blue wall states where we've got a lot of working class voters. Kamala Harris is a coastal politician. She's a California politician with some appeal along the Acela corridor. But when you really get into the heartland of the country, where the swing states are, where the election is won and lost, I think she's going to actually have an image rating that looks a lot more like Hillary Clinton than an image rating even like Joe Biden.
What about the logistics and the legalities of what they're trying to do, though, Matt? If Biden comes out tonight and says he has a medical condition, then I get it. If he doesn't say he has a medical condition, but he's doing the right thing for the country by getting out of the way, he's only doing it because he can't win. And that's not the way our primaries go. 14.5 million people that disagree with you and me voted in those primaries. They wanted Joe Biden. He is still the presumptive nominee, no matter what Kamala Harris says today, or no matter what Obama says today. This is patently unfair. You and I get accused of attacking and hating democracy. They're literally circumventing democracy, are they not?
They are. And actually, that started during the primary contest. There were some states like Florida that just said, well, we're not even going to have an election, a primary. We're not even going to do this. We're just going to say that Joe Biden gets our delegates. And it turns out that that was a pretty foolish path for them to go down, because it's going to be hard for them to lecture us about the great virtues of democracy.
Yes.
When like there are going to be some vape-filled rooms in the back of Chicago, like, amphitheater that are going to decide that Kamala Harris is just coronated as the nominee without having to go to Iowa, go to New Hampshire, places where when she was actually running for president, she did not fare particularly well. So that's problematic. But I think the reason this happened, I can just be straight with you and your audience, it's because Nancy Pelosi was slowly feeding whatever is left of Joe Biden into a political wood chipper. Like every day you woke up and saw another 3-5 House Democrats saying, you're too old, you can't lead, you have to pass the torch, you're no longer capable to be the masthead of our party. And I think the drumbeat of that day after day after day, that Pelosi torture chamber she threw him in, ultimately was unbearable for him. And while I think in his own mind, such that it's still active, he believes he can win. But when he was confronted with the machine of the Democratic Party, it showcased the real limits on the powers of the presidency. I mean, think about that. You just saw an American president get brought to heel by the machine. That's how powerful that machine is. And make no mistake, Kamala Harris is a machine candidate. She was a machine candidate as Attorney General in California. Then when she ran for U.S. Senate, and now the entire establishment is wrapping around her. And while there may be a little bit of a media honeymoon that comes with that on the front end, trust me, on the back end, when you start looking at her Marxist record, her statements about giving free healthcare to illegal aliens, it's not going to sit well with voters in the center of the country.
Exactly right. It's Matt Gaetz, District 1 Republican, great state of Florida, the Firebrand. Go and check out get his book, Firebrand, and also check out everything he does in social media. The broadcast is amazing. I'm glad I don't have to compete with you. Stay in the house already. Don't be coming after me for my job, because you'd get it easily. Let's go back into the assassination attempt. I think Jim Jordan does a masterful job the other day by questioning Cheadle about whether there were two shooters, about whether there was more Secret Service requested by Trump. She tried to get her way out of it by saying, well, that specific event, they didn't request any extra help. Well, because they probably gave up. They'd asked for it the entire time. You didn't have enough. You had more HSI there than you had Secret Service in Pennsylvania, and you had a guy. Matt, I don't know if you're a guy who shoots. I've got an AR-15. I'm not a very great shot. I could have made that shot from 140 yards. You've got a guy on a roof that everybody sees and is yelling about upwards of an hour earlier. Some say 3 hours earlier they saw this guy, and they did nothing. What the hell happened? What do you know that my audience doesn't know about what happened that day?
It was a catastrophic failure across all systems. And now we just learned today that the shooter was actually flying a drone around 2 hours before the ultimate shooting occurred. And so there, you really have to ask, why was there not control over the airspace? Why wasn't there monitoring about any transmission from the drone back to any receiver system or control system that the shooter was operating? And then, we could see with our own eyes the videos where Trump supporters were identifying this individual. And I think what gives folks a lot of concern is when they see the answers change from the people who are supposed to be doing the investigating.
Right.
When first we hear, the roof was at too steep a pitch, we never thought somebody could maintain a presence up there. Well, then you see it with your own eyes. Then you hear, that we couldn't possibly have included this area in the security perimeter. And then you hear, wait a second, there were local law enforcement who were in the building at that very time. And I think the good news is that the lead inspector general on this is the Homeland Security Inspector General. He is a straight shooter. He has exposed a lot of the corruption from Mayorkas on the border, and I trust the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General to do a thorough investigation if he is not impaired, because there's been other circumstances where he's been trying to expose the corruption that Mayorkas has allowed to flourish, and they take active measures to block some of his work. So we're going to be keeping a very close eye on the Inspector General's ability to get access to the evidence and witnesses. And it also raises suspicion when some of the communications that are normally recorded get wiped and are not recorded and don't exist. Those things create more questions and continue to, I think, rattle an agency right now in the Secret Service that is very much in disarray as a consequence of poor leadership, not poor work by the frontline agents.
At Rep Matt Gaetz over on all the socials, REPMATTGAETZ, at Rep Matt Gaetz on all the socials. I've got to ask you about the Missouri v. Biden case didn't go exactly like we wanted. I know Andrew Bailey very well in Missouri. He's going to keep on pressing this to stop the censorship through government arm reaching into social media that stops people like you and me from being seen. Free speech is not really very free on social media, and you can understand that if the companies are working privately and they say the terms of service are this. The problem comes when government reaches in and says, take that down, block what Matt Gaetz is saying, block what Pags is saying. And that's been happening for a long time. I don't love how Missouri v. Biden is right now. The Supreme Court seemed to kick the can down the road a little bit. Where are we when it comes to stopping government from restricting our First Amendment by almost ordering or paying off social media sites to censor people like you and me?
My role in the Congress is as an authorizer and an oversight investigator. And there are other people on committees that do the appropriations. Now, I typically vote against those appropriations because they have not curtailed this activity. So we can write all the reports and do all the investigations and bring the witnesses forward, but we've got to stop writing the check to fund the censorship industrial complex.
Yes.
And right now, Republicans in Congress are all too willing to give the money to CISA at DHS or the Department of State or some of the folks at the NSA or even in the executive office of the White House who, as a crazy reflex to COVID, were trying to get truthful information taken down. We've got testimony that they were literally trying to censor the truth because it didn't fit with the behaviors that they wanted to cajole out of the American people. And we have exposed this. It is in black and white. And you know what their answer is? You are welcome. That is the role of government. We ought to be the ones saying what is and isn't acceptable. Everyone should be heartened to know that's happening. And so if we really care, we'll defund it. If we really care, we will limit the authorities of these agencies to do it because in a way, Pags, they're not clandestine about this. It's not like they're engaged in what they believe to be an illicit, unconstitutional activity that they're doing below the table. They're laying all their cards face up and saying,
right.
That's right. We think our role is to manage the information space online. And if we find out that somebody is buying Bibles, talking about how much they love the Second Amendment, saying build the wall, if they talk about going to Catholic church too much, if their parents going to school board meetings, then somehow these people get labeled as dangerous. They get deplatformed, demonetized, and really ripped away from the digital world that is an important place for Americans to operate and where we have a right to operate.
Has this House of Representatives under Republican rule done any defunding? I mean, you're right. You've got the purse strings. I've got Chip Roy on here all the time, wants to defund everything. And the purse strings are never used. The leverage is never used. We never seem to dig in. Has anything been defunded? It would be as simple as you just said, right? The appropriation can just be taken away until they do what you want them to do. It's simple.
Yeah, but see, the reason that doesn't happen is because the way we have funded the government for the last 8-9 years is through these continuing resolutions and omnibus spending bills. And so when you lash every single asset of government together in one funding bill, well, then people throw their hands up in the air and say, well, we'll just keep doing it like we did last time, or maybe give a little small haircut here or a little plus up there. But at the end of the day, there's no programmatic review. There's no individualized scrutiny on these different authorities and things. Now, we did offer amendments, for example, to defund CISA at Homeland Security, where a lot of this censorship was housed. And we had dozens of Republicans join Democrats to save those bureaucracies. We need a different batch of Republicans here who will look at those abuses at the Department of State, sometimes even at the Department of Defense, at Homeland, and then rip away the funding, put a prohibition on it, and if they violate that prohibition, then zero out the salaries of those bureaucrats. That's how you do it. It's not impossible. It can be done. We got a lot of state legislatures who do a great job at what I just described, but in Congress, there isn't the courage, and that's what I'm here trying to instill. And frankly, when President Trump returns to the White House, we hope that courage is contagious and that people get the will to go and zero out the censorship industrial complex funding.
The entire time you were talking there, I could just see the image of Kevin McCarthy in my head. What's interesting is he tried to primary Nancy Mace and spent millions of dollars in South Carolina, and Mace won by 30. That buoys me. That makes me feel pretty good about things. But Matt, I'd be stupid if I didn't ask you this question. When you saw Kevin McCarthy and you were telling him it's on video everywhere, you'd get booed if you went up there. Why don't you go up and speak? And he looked like the weasel that I think that he is. And then he goes on some television network complaining about you. I love that you're unafraid to do that because people will give you a hard time now that you did that. But you were absolutely right. Why didn't Kevin McCarthy go up there and say, I'm backing? Look, Nikki Haley went up there and she hated on Trump the entire time in the primary system. He should have gone up there and taken his booze because the guy isn't doing good work. What do you think the deal is with Kevin McCarthy? Everything you just described, the weak-kneed, mealy-mouthed, no vertebrae Republican, I just keep seeing his face.
Yeah, it seems he's the archetype for that version of republicanism that's failed for so long. And, the swamp monsters, they actually like to be down in the muck. They don't like to stick their head up. They don't like to soar high. They like to be down in the muck and try to be undetected as they do their bad acts. And Kevin McCarthy did that for a great deal of time until we took him out of power here. And in that particular circumstance, what you didn't see on the video, I'm a counterpuncher. I was there to see delegates, to inspire our activists. And there I turn around and I see McCarthy dogging me on air on CNN.
Oh,
and I just
okay.
thought, well, if you're going to stand here on the floor and attack me live on air, it's a convention. Why not do a little convening?
Matt, maybe 45 seconds, but I want you to tell me about the congressional stock trading stuff. Is there some way to stop anybody who's serving in government from hedging their bets and knowing information they shouldn't and buying and selling stocks with that information?
As I often say, for the same reason you don't let the referee bet on the game, members of Congress should not be able to trade individual stocks. And I got to be honest, there is a growing coalition from the right, the left, the center of people who actually are disgusted by our colleagues out there using inside information to personally benefit themselves. And not everyone does that, but we know the ones who do, and we think it should end. And so I'm going to continue to pursue this. I'm going to be taking it up over the summer with the speaker, and I hope that we'll be able to restore some confidence in the American people that we're actually acting in the public interest, not self-interest, by banning members of Congress from trading individual stocks.
U.S. Representative Matt Gaetz, go to gaetz.house.gov/firebrand. Follow him everywhere. Rep Matt Gaetz on all the socials. Matt, thanks a million for your voice and for caring so much about this country and for coming on again today. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. See you soon.
All right, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.